Historical memory is much more than the sum of individual recollections. It is the collective capacity to know about the past and, as a society, to determine what we do not want to live through again. The Truth Commission established in Ecuador became the 33rd Truth Commission in the world. Its mandate was to clarify grave human rights violations that occurred between 1984 and 1988, and also during other periods up until 2008. The investigation of these violations led to an unprecedented search for the truth. It was based on documenting and listening to the victims' voluntary testimonies, in addition to those of their families and the witnesses to these crimes. Rosa Mireya Cárdenas Hernández was 22 years old when she joined the Alfaro Vive Carajo group as an activist. In late 1983, after being detained in Esmeraldas and arrested for 2 months, she tried to obtain residence in Nicaragua. In August 1984, upon returning to Managua after participating in a youth conference in Panama, Mireya had a stopover in Costa Rica. There she was detained by the police and taken to a torture center in San Jose. Subsequently, she was illegally and clandestinely deported to Ecuador.
Me hicieron firmar un papel de consentimiento que me traían acá al Ecuador.
Cárdenas remembers that when she arrived in Quito, she was personally received by the then Minister of Government and Police, Luis Robles Plaza. With a hood over her head and accused of high treason by her captors, she was driven to the outskirts of Quito and locked up in an underground cell 2 meters long by 1 meter wide. Her confinement lasted for 2 weeks. Much later, and accompanied by truth commissioners and investigators, she recognized the place of her confinement. It was the basement of the Military Intelligence Brigade in Conocoto.
Y en este lado de acá eran las investigaciones, donde estuve desnuda todo el tiempo, donde me pusieron electricidad en las manos, donde me daban golpes, me lanzaban agua fría.
Victims who had served in the army also remember the basement at Conocoto.
Me encerraron ahí esposado, me denigraron, pues lo más feo para mí era las torturas que ejercían a otros detenidos ahí. Los gritos desgarradores, y yo decía, ¿qué horas me vienen a torturar a mí?
Eran las descargas eléctricas, las humillaciones de obligarte a desvestirte, tú misma quedar desnuda delante de estos tipos.
Los ahogamientos, las tensiones de las extremidades, las imputaciones de electricidad al cuerpo por todas las partes.
Rosa Mireya Cárdenas was taken to the penal prison. There she received a bouquet of roses with a message handwritten by León Febres Cordero. The message wished her a prompt recovery and invited her to confess. In mid-1985, militants of Alfaro Vive Carajo and the Colombian M19 kidnapped Guayaquil banker Nahim Isaías. In connection with this case, and after a confrontation with authorities, the Alfaro Vive militants, Alfonso Benavides and Juan Carlos Acosta, were injured. Although they were detained alive, they both died in the hands of the police.
Yo personalmente retiré el cadáver de la morgue y mi hermano tenía hematomas en todas partes, tenía golpes en todo lugar, lo habían realmente matado a palos.
September 2, 1985. Despite the willingness and attempts of the kidnappers to negotiate, the president's order was final. Attack the house which the kidnappers were occupying and leave no survivors. No one, not even the kidnapped banker, survived the attack.
El primer mandatario manifestó enfáticamente: yo, León Febres Cordero, tomé la decisión.
The president's heavy involvement in this violent outcome was evident. It included his private secretary, Carlos Pareja, the governor of Guayas province, Jaime Nebot, of the Minister of Government, Luis Robles Plaza, and his advisor, Gustavo Lemus. In a letter, Febres Cordero ordered police officers Milton Andrade, Gustavo Gallegos, and Edgar Vaca to follow the orders of these functionaries, who would then inform him of the results.
El señor Juan Isaías, con lágrimas en sus ojos, me dijo que en la ciudad de Quito, en su oficina, él se reunió con el ingeniero Febres Cordero y le dijo al ingeniero Febres Cordero que a las 7 de la mañana se iban a reunir en el departamento los hermanos para analizar qué paso seguir ante las ofertas y las posibilidades de negociación. Febres Cordero le aseguró y le dijo: Juan, no te preocupes, que yo voy a esperar. Y sorpresivamente, en la madrugada entraron a la casa y pasó lo que pasó. Esto pues es algo que don Juan Isaías me dijo siempre que no podía olvidar, ¿no? Era un dolor demasiado grande, porque él cree, pues él me decía, la frase que él me decía es: Febres Cordero mató a mi hermano.
Numerous illegalities led to tortures, homicide, or forced disappearances. This was the case of Luis Vaca, imprisoned in November 1985 in Esmeraldas, along with Susana Cajas and Javier Jarrín. Vaca and his companions were first taken to the Montúfar barracks and later tortured at the Military Intelligence Brigade in Conocoto. 15 days later, Cajas and Jarrín were abandoned in an open field where the police officially arrested them. Vaca remained for 2.5 years in solitary confinement in Conocoto.
Todos los días me sacaban el aire.
The Truth Commission determined premeditation in the deaths of at least 12 members of Alfaro Vive Carajo between 1984 and 1988. These were the cases, among others, of Fausto Basantes, Ricardo Merino, and Arturo Jarrín. Fausto Basantes, for example, executed in Quito, was ambushed as he waited for another Alfaro Vive militant who was collaborating with the police. Contradicting the police report, which mentions a long shootout, witnesses to the event said that Basantes raised his hand in a sign of surrender, that he was forced to lie down on the ground and was riddled with bullets.
Son más de 40 tiros los que Fausto tenía en su cuerpo.
In October 1986, the press reported the death of Arturo Jarrín, the principal leader of Alfaro Vive, during a confrontation with the police in the Carcelén neighborhood in Quito.
No hubo tal enfrentamiento porque el cuerpo de Arturo tenía huellas de tortura, tenía las muñecas muy magulladas y tenía moretones por todo el cuerpo. Y el número de orificios de bala que tenía el cuerpo eran incontables.
The Truth Commission confirmed that Jarrín was arrested in Panama in a joint operation. This was confirmed by the author of that arrest, a former member of the Defense Forces. In the G2 Panamanian intelligence, Jarrín was recognized by an informant from Ecuador and handed over to 2 Ecuadorian officers.
Esto le agarraron la mano y le inyectó, y apenas que lo inyectó él de una vez quedó estático, pues. Lo agarraron y lo montaron al vehículo de ellos. Eso fue aproximadamente como a las 2 de la mañana. Y me dijo el coronel que los acompañan al aeropuerto, que iban, sí lo escuché hablando, que le estaba diciendo a alguien desde el Ecuador que el avión salía a las 6 de la mañana.
Days later, Arturo Jarrín was found dead in Quito. A witness from the Carcelén neighborhood declared that she saw how a group of policemen murdered a man on the street. Ricardo Merino was another victim of extrajudicial execution. About this death, which occurred in Cuenca in June 1986, policeman Hugo España, who was implicated in the Restrepo case, wrote in his book, The Witness, "When we carried out the search of the premises, under court order, we found him sleeping on the bed. When we entered his bedroom, he got scared. defenseless, dressed only in his underwear. The heads of the police operation ordered him to get up, nailed him to the wall, and fired their guns at point-blank range.
Tenía golpes en su quijada y en su abdomen, y le asesinaron con 3 tiros a quemarropa, 1 en el cráneo y 2 al corazón.
A manifest example of adulteration of facts was demonstrated by the photos of the bodies of 3 Alfaro Vive militants, Hamlet Vasconez, Marcelo Sarabia, and Maria Landau, after a violent police assault on a house in the Altamira neighborhood in Quito in September 1986. In careless eagerness, the police revealed the adulteration of the scene. The photos show, for instance, that the bodies had been moved. Some photos show the bodies covered with money, others disarmed, and others with weapons. In that operation, Police Captain Galomino was killed. The police version assured that he was killed by the Alfaro Vive militants under siege. However, a military intelligence report assured that given the shot's orientation, it did not come from the house under siege. Furthermore, the ballistics did not correspond to those of the weapons found inside. Not all extrajudicial executions were directed at members of the opposition. Luis Garcia, a baggage handler at the Simón Bolívar Airport in Guayaquil, was murdered in an intelligence operation investigating the theft of a camera from a passenger's luggage. Garcia and a dozen workers at the Airport Services Association were subjected to outrageous tortures at the Air Force Base in Guayaquil.
Lo metieron a la piscina amarrado a la mano y los pies, ahogándolo dentro de la piscina, dentro de la institución armada, dentro de la Fuerza Aérea Ecuatoriana.
On January 8, 1988, Carlos Santiago and Pedro Andrés Restrepo Arizmendi, Ecuadorians, aged 17 and 14 respectively, disappeared. They were driving, first to pick up a friend, and then to the airport, where their friend would be taking an international flight. The boys were in a Chevrolet Trooper and without a driver's license. They never made it to their destination.
Sí, soy inocente.
Second Lieutenant Doris Moran, who was in charge of the investigation, forged a fictitious version of events that implicated that the miners were drug addicts and left-wing activists.
Trataron de decir que éramos narcotraficantes, que los niños habían desaparecido, se habían matado en un supuesto accidente de tránsito por venganzas.
After a courageous and resolute struggle by the Restrepo family, and 2 years after the disappearance of their sons, President Borja submitted the police version of the events to an international commission. After 1 year of work, the International Commission concluded that the brothers disappeared while they were in police custody. 10 years later, the state of Ecuador acknowledged before the Inter-American Court of Human Rights that the case of the Restrepo brothers was a state crime. The victims' age, political, religious, or gender affiliations did not restrain cruelty. Torturers justified their actions by automatically assuming that their victims were guilty and therefore outside the judicial system.
Me ponían una pistola ahí en el cerebro, me decían que me iban a matar. Me violaron varias veces por la parte de la vagina y por la parte del ano, que tuve hemorragias, y hoy en día es el día que, bueno, pues hoy es el día que no puedo ir al servicio normalmente, ¿no? Porque tengo que introducirme el dedo para poder defecar, porque si no, esos músculos no me responden normalmente, ¿no?
Yo tengo 2 disparos, el uno está a la altura del corazón y el otro está más acá arriba. Entonces sobre estos 2 empezaron a manipular sus dedos y era un dolor insoportable. Y seguían ellos interrogándome ahí en base a golpes, en base a descargas de un aparato que tenían portátil.
Between 1984 and 1988, the more frequent use of military personnel facilitated pursuit and investigations of civilians. An example is the Sabanilla case that took place in Loja in August 1986. A contingent of Army personnel arrested 35 students in Celica who were participating in a camping trip organized by the Secondary Students Federation. The Infantry Brigade No. 7 Loja, under the command of General José Gallardo Román, had 23 of the young people locked up in a 3-square-meter room.
Y con ese cable me golpeaban a mí, ¿no?
Whippings, body blows, and kicks, submissions to electric shocks, undressed and photographed naked, hung from their genitals, these students were forced to sign declarations in which they stated that they had not been tortured.
Un golpe, yo caí en ese rincón ahí, en esa parte.
In February 1986, the Commander-in-Chief of the Air Force, Frank Vargas Pasos, accused the Minister of Defense, General Luis Piñeros, of corruption in the purchase of a Fokker airplane for TAMI Airlines. A month later, adducing that his accusation had not been listened to, Vargas took over the Manta Air Base for a few hours. After being taken to the capital, he rebelled again, this time at the Quito Air Base, where he was supported by Air Force aero technicians. The following day, under a state of emergency and censored press, there was a rapid army attack that left 4 dead and 7 wounded. Vargas was captured. Until January 1987, almost 1 year after the uprising in Manta, at the Taura Air Force Base, elite forces known as commandos organized a revolt against Febres Cordero. They kidnapped the president and his entourage and demanded amnesty for General Vargas. Febres Cordero made the commitment to not carry out reprisals against his captors, but the agreement was not fulfilled and the commandos were detained and tortured.
Encapuchados y tirados en el Hércules como coger sacos de arroz, así, uno encima de otro.
Me torturaron, me pusieron corriente de 110 voltios en los testículos.
Me metieron corriente aquí por la pantorrilla.
Fui torturado y me dañaron.
Me tiraban soñado cada 2 horas.
A war council that did not afford them even the most basic procedural guarantees sentenced the commandos to between 6 months and 16 years at the Garcia Moreno jail. The majority of them were tortured for prolonged periods of time at the hands of elite military and police forces. Official violence got to the point that it was obvious that the administration was putting pressure on political and social leaders. This could certainly have been the case involving Congressman Diego Delgado. Delgado, who was serving on the Human Rights Commission, impeached the Minister of Government. Soon after the process began, he was kidnapped and brutally beaten until he was left for dead.
Y que en el juicio le iba a demostrar cuando menos 114 casos gravísimos de violación de derechos humanos, incluyendo homicidios, incluyendo torturas tremendas, casos de desaparición de personas.
One of the bloodiest cases took place in December 1987 and involved La Tigrera Mining Company and the eviction of miners who were members of an artisan mining association. The assault